Hey you guys, Kari here from the Alfred Homestead, and today I wanted to share with you all how I harvested and processed the goldenrod. So the goldenrod is commonly mistaken for ragweed. It's actually not. The pollen is very heavy, and so it doesn't actually end up in the air like we commonly think, but it's a very useful plant. A lot of people use this plant as a tea. It has more antioxidants than green tea. So I've seen up to 7 times as many antioxidants as green tea. It's also used to help treat UTIs and prevent kidney stones. So there are a lot of good benefits to this plant, this common plant that we have growing in abundance in our front meadow. So I'm just going to go ahead and collect some. I am going to make some tea out of this, so I'm going to dry some as well as make some goldenrod jelly. I thought those would be fun projects to make with this. And don't worry, you guys, I have more than enough of this to go around in our meadow, so I left plenty for the birds and all the little critters to enjoy into this wonderful fall season that we're having here on the homestead. So I harvested a good amount. This ended up being about 16 cups of packed goldenrod flowers. So enough to make one batch of jelly and to have plenty of tea left over. So I was just stripping the smaller leaves and the flower buds from the main stem. I really didn't worry about taking the leaves off because goldenrod tea is actually made with both the flowers and the leaves. So I just took them off the main stem. The woody part I did not keep. So this is the first step in making the goldenrod jelly. We're going to make a very concentrated goldenrod tea. So I've got 8 cups of packed goldenrod flower and leaves here, and I've got about 6.5, 7 cups of water, just enough to cover all of the flowers. So I'm going to let this come to a boil, and I will boil that for about 5 minutes. And then once that has boiled for 5 minutes, I will turn the heat off and I will just let it sit for the rest of the afternoon until it gets completely cooled. So a few hours later, I will go ahead and strain that out, making sure to squeeze out as much of that liquid as possible from the flowers, from that pulp that's left over. And we went and gave that to our chickens, so that pulp did not go to waste either. And I'm doing this the day before I want to make the jelly, just because when you have kids, you kind of have to do things in steps like that. So what I ended up doing was, once I had about those 5 cups of concentrated goldenrod tea, I went ahead and put that in a container overnight until I was ready to get canning. And then I went ahead and dried some as well for the tea. I loaded up my dehydrator and also put some on some cookie sheets to just have some more drying around the house. So this was probably another 4 or 5 cups of goldenrod that I just left out for a few days to dry. And this is what the finished product looks like. This is just one tray off the dehydrator, so I've got a lot more to go. So now it's the next day, and I've got my goldenrod tea here that we're going to go ahead and start warming up on the stove, because now we're going to get canning. I've got my canner out. It's full about halfway with water. I'm going to bring that up to about 180 degrees. And I'm going to go ahead and get my jars and all of my ingredients ready to make this jam. So what we'll need, you can see my thermometer there checking on the temperature and just watching it. So I will need 5 cups of the goldenrod tea, 6 cups of sugar, and then 2 packs of gelatin for this recipe. This recipe will come out to about 8 half pints or 4 to 5 pints. So now I'm just going to add both packets of pectin, since that has come up to a simmer, and I will let that boil for about another minute just to make sure that all of that gets completely dissolved in the tea before I add my sugar. So now that that has started to boil, I am going to let that to continue to boil. I will turn it down a notch, but it will continue to boil for just another minute or two. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in my 6 cups of sugar to this. I wanted to be careful. I should have used a bigger pot for this, but I just was too lazy to break out the big one. So go ahead and stir that in, and I kept constantly stirring to make sure that all of the sugar was going to be dissolved and that nothing started sticking at the bottom or anything like that. And then I'm going to bring that up to a boil as well. So I turned it back up a notch. Now I'm on like medium or so. Now it has come to a boil. I will let it boil for a minute or two before I start checking it for the gel consistency that we want. Since this is a jam made with tea, we need to just make sure that it's actually going to gel up properly once it sets. So I just did that really quick by grabbing a small little bowl and getting about a teaspoon of that liquid and putting it in the bowl and then putting that in the freezer for just a minute and then seeing if it gelled up properly before I went ahead and took the heat off. So I kept it at a low simmer while I did this. So now I've got my clean sterile jars here. They were warm in the oven, so they are ready to be packed with this liquid. So I just ladled some out initially because, again, I had a small pot I was working with. I didn't ladle every single bit into these jars. I just kind of got half of it out and then poured the rest in really quickly. So I just didn't want to make a huge mess with the hot syrup, basically, that it was. And always make sure to wipe your rims, of course. You don't want anything affecting that seal. And these are going to go in the canner for 10 minutes. So they're going to water bathe for 10 minutes at about 180 to 190 degrees is about what I kept it. You always have to just figure out what works with your stove and your canner. It's always better to inch your way up with the degrees. You don't want to be on full blast heat for 10 minutes and then it's too hot and then your jars break when you put them in. It's been a learning curve to just figure out what works with our stove and my canner and how many cans are in there. So I'm still learning. I'm learning as I go. So I'm definitely not a professional at this yet. So I believe right here the water was about 185, which was about perfect. The temperature might drop a little bit, but generally speaking, you just want to keep the inside contents within 10 degrees of the water so that you don't have any issues with your cans breaking or anything like that. And I did have to top my canner off with some water. I always have hot water freshly boiled in the kettle sitting there for standby in case I need to top my canner off with water. And in this case, I did. So I'm just topping that off with some freshly boiled water to get the water level about 1 inch above those cans. All right, so I've got those pint jars in there ready to can for 10 minutes. And this was after 10 minutes is up. I'm going to go ahead and pop those out and let those rest for about 8 hours or so. And they all sealed really quickly, pretty much as soon as they came out of the water. But we just go ahead and let those sit there for the afternoon. So there we have it. We've got about 5 pints of goldenrod jelly. And this is the finished product. It gelled up beautifully and it tastes kind of like a cross between chamomile and lemon. It's a really nice taste. I had this on a piece of toast with just some butter and it was amazing. I think you could also just put a little teaspoon of that in some hot water and call it a tea. So it came out really nice. I'm very happy with the product. So I will be making another batch of that. So the very next day I went out and harvested even more. So we'll have 2 batches of the goldenrod jam, and I always end up giving them to friends and family just as little thank yous or just as little gifts for coming over and seeing us. So those will be nice little gifts to hand out throughout the year. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and don't forget to subscribe.